My father made the announcement with a champagne glass in his hand and a smile that made everyone lean in. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner, and the whole room was glowing the way people do when they think they're watching a happy family. My mother stood beside him in navy silk, one hand resting lightly on his arm, soaking in the admiration of 30 guests who had come to celebrate 4 decades of marriage, good taste, and the polished Dixon image. "We're taking the whole family to Hawaii next week for another celebration," my father said. Everyone clapped. My sister Megan actually squealed. Derek grinned. A few of my mother's church friends pressed their hands to their chests like this was the sweetest thing they'd ever heard. And for one small, foolish second, I let myself feel included. I smiled too. I pictured warm air, ocean water, maybe one morning where nobody needed me to carry a tray, or wipe a counter, or watch someone else's children while they enjoyed the view. Then I made the mistake of asking one simple question. "What time are we leaving?" The silence that followed didn't feel normal. It felt like a room missing a stair. My father turned and looked straight at me. My mother's smile tightened first, then his did. "You don't need to know, Wendy," he said, loud enough for every guest to hear. "You're not part of this trip. Someone has to stay behind and watch the kids." A few people laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe it was a joke. It wasn't. My sister didn't correct him. My mother didn't soften it. Derek looked down at his drink. And I stood there, in a black dress I had chosen carefully for their big night, feeling every eye in that room slide over me like I was something embarrassing left out on a table. Not a daughter. Not a guest. Just unpaid help with a name. "Tell me something, what do you do when the people who raised you make it clear, in front of everyone, that your place in the family was never beside them, only behind them?" Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe and stand for dignity. I'm Wendy Dixon. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my parents humiliated me at their wedding anniversary dinner. What they didn't know was this. I had been building a secret for 3 years, and that night I finally decided to use it. I didn't argue. That's the part people expect to be different when they hear this story. They imagine I said something sharp, something bold, something that made the room turn against my parents in that moment. I didn't. I smiled. It was the same small, practiced smile I'd been using for most of my life, the one that said it's fine, even when it wasn't, the one that made everything easier for everyone else. "Of course," I said quietly. "That makes sense." It didn't. But I had spent years learning how to make things sound reasonable, even when they cut right through me. I stepped back toward the kitchen, still holding a dessert plate I hadn't realized I'd picked up. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought they'd shake. In the living room, the celebration resumed like nothing had happened. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. My mother leaned into a guest, already retelling the Hawaii plan like it had always been this perfect, generous idea. And me? I disappeared into the background. Again. That's the thing about being the reliable one in a family. You don't get pushed out all at once. You get gently repositioned over time until one day, you realize you're no longer in the picture at all. In the kitchen, I set the plate down and turned on the sink. Water rushed over porcelain. My reflection blurred in the window above it. I tried to pinpoint the exact moment this became normal. Was it the first holiday I showed up early to cook? Or the first time someone handed me a child without asking? Or the first time my mother introduced me not as her daughter but as, "Wendy, she helps out"? The answer was, I couldn't find one. Because it hadn't been one moment. It had been hundreds. Small, quiet decisions made about me, without me. Behind me, the door swung open. Megan stepped in, her heels clicking lightly against the tile. "Hey," she said, softer now. "Don't take it personally." I didn't turn around. "I'm not," I replied. She sighed like I was being difficult. "You know how it is. Derek and I really need this break. It's been a lot lately with the kids." I rinsed another plate. "Of course," I said again. Because that's what I always said. And maybe some of you listening know exactly what that feels like, when your role in the family isn't chosen, it's assigned, and the only way to survive it is to agree, even when it slowly erases you. Megan didn't say thank you. She never did. Instead, she leaned against the counter like we were discussing something small, something already settled. "I'll send you their schedule," she said, scrolling through her phone. "Oliver's been a little sensitive lately, so just keep his routine consistent. And Sophie can't have strawberries anymore, she had a reaction last month." I dried my hands slowly. "Not would you mind. Not can you help. Just instructions. Like I'd already agreed. Like I always would. I also wrote down their bedtime stuff, she continued. Oh, and Oliver might need eardrops. I'll text you the dosage. She turned her screen toward me for a second, then pulled it back, already moving on. Derek appeared in the doorway behind her, loosening his tie. All set? He asked. Yeah, Megan said. Wendy's got it. He nodded once, barely looking at me. Great. And that was it. That was the entire conversation about how my life would be used for the next week. No pause. No question. No space for me to exist inside it. They left the kitchen together, their voices fading back into the hum of the party. I stood there alone, the sound of laughter spilling in from the other room, and something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a door unlocking. Because for the first time, the thought came fully formed, not emotional, not reactive, just clear. They don't see me as family. They see me as function, as convenience, as something that fills gaps when needed and disappears when not. And if that was true, then I didn't belong to them the way I thought I did. I picked up my phone. Megan's message had already come through. A long list. Schedules. Allergies. Instructions. Not one line that said thank you. Not one line that said, "Are you okay?" I stared at it for a long moment. Then I locked my screen. Because something else had surfaced beneath the hurt. A memory. A camera wrapped in a soft scarf at the back of my closet. A version of me that existed outside this kitchen, outside this house, outside this role. A version of me that had been quietly growing for 3 years. And standing there, with my family celebrating just a few feet away like I didn't exist, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. I had already started building a life they knew nothing about. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to come back to this one at all. The party ended the way it always did, with me cleaning up. By the time the last guest left, the house was quiet again except for the soft hum of the dishwasher and the faint clink of glass as I stacked the final set of champagne flutes. My parents had gone upstairs without saying goodnight. Megan and Derek had already left, their car pulling out of the driveway like nothing unusual had happened. No one asked if I'd eaten. No one noticed that I hadn't sat down once. I moved through the kitchen slowly, almost methodically, wiping counters that were already clean, folding napkins that didn't need folding. It gave my hands something to do. Because if I stopped moving, I knew I'd feel everything at once. Around midnight, I finally sat down at the kitchen table. My body ached in that quiet, dull way that comes from being useful for too many hours. I pulled my phone out again. Megan's message was still there. Schedules, instructions, control. I almost laughed. Because for the first time, it didn't feel normal. It felt strange. Like reading directions meant for someone else. That's when I remembered I still had work to send to a client. I'd pushed a deadline to help with this party. Of course I had. My laptop was at home. My mother's sat on the counter. I hesitated for a second. Then I opened it. Her email was already logged in. I wasn't looking for anything. I really wasn't. But then I saw it. A subject line with my name in it. Hawaii arrangements, Wendy situation. Something in my chest tightened. I should have closed it. I knew that. But there are moments in life where you can feel the truth sitting just behind a door, and you already know it's going to hurt. I clicked. The message opened, from my mother to Megan. Keep Wendy here to watch the kids. She doesn't have anything important to do anyway. It's like having free help. She should be grateful we give her something to do. I didn't breathe. Not at first. Then Megan's reply, right below it. Totally agree. She'll probably feel useful for once. It's kind of sad, honestly. I read it again. And again. Not because I didn't understand, but because some part of me still wanted to believe I was reading it wrong. Free help. Useful for once. Kind of sad. I sat there in my parents' kitchen, the same kitchen where I had spent years cooking their meals, washing their dishes, showing up early and staying late, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not emotionally, not defensively. Just truth. If you've ever had a moment like that, where something finally clicks into place in a way you can't unsee, you know how quiet it gets inside you. I took a screenshot. Then another, emailed them to myself, cleared the history, closed the laptop, and sat there in the dark a little longer. Because something had just changed. Not in them, in me. And I knew, with a certainty that didn't need to be loud, I wasn't going to stay. I left my parents' house at 1 in the morning. The streets were empty, the kind of quiet that feels heavier after something shifts inside you. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just drove. Because if I heard another voice, any voice, I was afraid it might pull me back into the version of myself that kept saying it's fine. And it wasn't fine anymore. When I got home, my apartment felt different. It was the same small space, beige carpet, secondhand couch, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people. My mother had once stood in the doorway and called it depressing. But that night, it felt like the only place in the world where I could breathe. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to my closet and reached for the back corner. The cashmere scarf was still there. Soft, folded carefully, untouched. I unwrapped it slowly. The camera rested inside, just like I'd left it. My Canon. The one I bought 3 years ago in a moment that felt impulsive, but had quietly become the most important decision I'd ever made. I held it in my hands and sat down on the edge of my bed. There was a time when this camera was the only place I felt seen, not by other people, but by myself. Through that lens, I had learned to notice things most people walked past. The woman waiting too long at a bus stop, the tired cashier at the end of a night shift, the way someone's shoulders carried a story they never said out loud. I called the series Invisible Women. I never told my family, not because I was hiding it, but because, somewhere deep down, I knew they wouldn't understand it. Or worse, they wouldn't see it. My phone buzzed softly beside me. I picked it up. The email was still there. From the gallery in California. Marcus Coleman, Coastal Light Gallery. He wanted to meet. He wanted to see my work in person. He had used the word exhibition. I had read it 3 times earlier that week and then closed the message, like it wasn't meant for someone like me. But now I understood something I hadn't before. Good things didn't happen to me because I waited for permission. They happened when I chose them. I opened the email again. My fingers hovered over the screen. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to ask anyone what to do. I just needed to decide. Some of you listening right now know that moment, that quiet space where everything could go one way, or completely change. If you've ever stood there, wondering whether to stay where you're expected, or step into something unknown, tell me where you're listening from. I always wonder how far these stories travel. I took a breath. Then I typed, "I'd love to meet. I can be in California this week." I hit send, and just like that, the life I had been quietly building in the dark started moving into the light. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, but because something inside me felt awake. Like my life had been running in the background for years, and suddenly it was asking to be lived in real time. By 6 in the morning, I was already packing. Not everything, just what mattered. 3 suitcases. Clothes I actually wore, my laptop, my camera equipment, the scarf, a few personal things that felt like mine, not borrowed, not assigned, not expected. Everything else stayed. The couch, the dishes, even the little framed photo of me and my family from years ago. I looked at it for a second, then turned it face down. Not out of anger, just clarity. At 9, my phone started ringing. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, and again. By the 4th call, she left a message. "Wendy, call me back. Megan says you're not answering. We need to go over the kids' schedule before we leave." I sat on the floor beside my suitcase, listening to her voice fill the room like it always had. Calm, controlled, certain, as if nothing had changed, as if I hadn't just read exactly what she thought of me. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Megan. "Are you seriously ignoring me? I need to know you've got everything handled." Handled. That word again. Like I was something to organize. I stared at the message. Then, slowly, I turned my phone off. Not because I didn't care, but because for once I needed to hear my own thoughts without theirs layered on top. By noon, my car was packed. My Honda Civic, the same one my mother always asked me to move out of the driveway, sat ready at the curb. I stood there for a moment, keys in hand. There was no dramatic feeling, no big speech in my head, just a quiet question. If I stay, what happens? And I already knew the answer. Nothing changes. I go back. I help. I disappear. Then another question. If I leave? I didn't know. And that was the point. I got in the car, started the engine, and pulled away. No one stood at the door. No one watched me go. It was strangely fitting, because leaving didn't feel like breaking something. It felt like stepping out of something that had already been broken for a long time. Some of you understand that kind of exit. The kind where there's no scene, just a quiet decision that changes everything. I drove for hours before I turned my phone back on. There were messages, missed calls, voicemails stacked one after another. I didn't open them. Not yet. Because for the first time in a long time, my life was finally moving forward, and I wasn't ready to let anything pull it backward again. I made it halfway through Pennsylvania before I stopped for gas. The sun was starting to set, stretching everything into gold and shadow, and for a moment, I just stood there beside my car, not moving, not rushing, not checking my phone, just existing. It felt unfamiliar, like I had stepped outside of a life that was always scheduled around someone else's needs. Inside the gas station, I bought a coffee I didn't really want and stood by the window watching cars come and go. Nobody knew me there. Nobody expected anything from me. And that simple thing, that absence of expectation, felt heavier than I thought it would. I got back in the car and finally turned my phone on. It lit up immediately. Missed calls from my mother. 6 voicemails. 3 texts from Megan. 1 from my father. I opened his first. "Wendy, your mother says you're being difficult. Call us." I stared at it for a second. Not angry. Just tired. Then Megan's. "What is wrong with you? We leave in 2 days. I need to know you're here for the kids." Need. Always need. And then the last one. The one that made me pause. "If you're not home when we get back from Hawaii, don't expect things to be the same." I read that twice. Then I set my phone down on the passenger seat, because for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of that. Don't expect things to be the same. They were right. Things wouldn't be the same. But not in the way they meant. I started the car again and pulled back onto the road. Miles stretched out in front of me. Unfamiliar. Unplanned. Mine. Somewhere in the quiet of that drive, another thought settled in, not sharp, not emotional, just steady. They thought I was leaving them, but I wasn't. I was leaving the role they had placed me in. And those are not the same thing. I drove until the sky turned completely dark, pulled into a roadside motel with flickering lights and a front desk clerk who barely looked up. It wasn't nice. It wasn't impressive, but it was enough. Inside the room, I set my camera on the small table by the window. For a moment, I just looked at it. 3 years. That's how long I had been quietly building something they never saw. Not because it wasn't there, but because they never thought to look. I picked it up and stepped outside. The parking lot was dim, lit by a single buzzing lamp. A woman stood near the vending machine, counting coins slowly, like she was trying to make something stretch just a little further. I didn't ask. I didn't interrupt. I just lifted the camera and took the shot, because that's what I had learned to do. See what others overlook, even when I used to be one of those people. If you've ever been the one no one really notices until they need something, you understand why that moment mattered. I went back inside, set the camera down gently, and for the first time since the anniversary dinner, I felt something close to peace. Not because everything was solved, but because I was no longer pretending I didn't see the truth. I woke up before sunrise, not because I had to, but because my body didn't feel heavy anymore. For years, mornings had started with a list. What needed to be done, who needed help, what I had to remember for someone else. That morning, there was no list, just quiet. I sat on the edge of the motel bed for a moment, letting that sink in. Then I reached for my camera. The air outside was cold, the kind that wakes you up instantly. The parking lot looked different in the early light, less lonely, more honest. The woman from the night before was gone, but the vending machine still hummed softly, like it had been waiting there all along. I lifted the camera again. Not because I needed content, not because anyone was expecting anything, but because this was mine. I drove the rest of the morning in silence. No music, no calls, just the steady rhythm of the road stretching forward, mile after mile, like it was giving me space to think without interruption. By noon, I crossed into Ohio. That's when my phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but something told me to look. It was Megan. A photo. Oliver and Sophie, sitting on their suitcases in my parents' living room, both looking tired and confused. Underneath it, one line, "They keep asking where you are." My chest tightened. Not from guilt. from something more complicated. Because I loved those kids. I always had. I had been there for birthdays, scraped knees, bedtime stories, quiet moments when no one else was paying attention. And suddenly, I wasn't. I stared at the photo longer than I meant to. Then another message came through. Mom says you're being selfish. Dad is furious. I don't understand why you're doing this. I set the phone down, closed my eyes, and let myself feel it fully this time. Not the version they were trying to hand me, the real version. I wasn't abandoning those kids. I was refusing to keep abandoning myself. And those two things can look the same to people who benefit from your silence. I picked up the phone again, typed a message, paused, deleted it. Because I knew anything I said right now would be pulled, twisted, turned into another reason why I was wrong. So instead, I did something I had never done before. I chose not to explain myself. The road opened up again in front of me. Wide, steady, certain. And somewhere between Ohio and Indiana, something settled inside me in a way I didn't expect. I didn't need them to understand. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Understanding wasn't what I had been missing all these years. Respect was. And respect doesn't start when other people agree with you. It starts the moment you stop asking for permission to live your own life. By the time the sun started to dip again, I realized something quietly powerful. No one was going to come after me. No one was going to stop me. Because the truth was, they never thought I would actually leave. By the third day, the road stopped feeling unfamiliar. It started to feel steady, like I had slipped into a rhythm I didn't know I was capable of. Wake up, drive, stop when I was tired, eat when I was hungry, think when I needed to. No one interrupting. No one assigning me a role. Just me, moving forward. I crossed into Nebraska sometime in the afternoon. The landscape opened wide in a way that made everything else feel small, flat fields stretching endlessly, the sky bigger than anything I had seen back in Boston. I pulled over at a rest stop just before sunset. Not because I had to, but because something in me said, stop here. I stepped out of the car and leaned against the hood, watching the light shift slowly across the horizon. Gold into orange, orange into something softer, quieter. It was the kind of moment I would have rushed through before. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I was always needed somewhere else. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up my camera. There was no one around. No subject, just space. Still, I lifted it and took the shot. Because for the first time, I wasn't just documenting what the world ignored. I was documenting what I used to ignore in my own life. Stillness, choice, time that belonged to me. I lowered the camera and exhaled slowly. That's when my phone buzzed again. I almost smiled. Not because I wanted to check it, but because I knew exactly what it would be. I turned it over. My mother. Of course. A voicemail. I didn't listen to it right away. Instead, I sat there a little longer, letting the quiet finish what it had started inside me. When I finally pressed play, her voice came through sharp and controlled, just like always. Wendy, this has gone far enough. You are creating unnecessary drama. Megan is overwhelmed, the children are confused, and your father is extremely disappointed. This is not how we raised you. I listened without reacting. Because something had shifted. That sentence, this is not how we raised you, used to land like a weight. Now, it sounded different. It sounded like a description of a version of me that no longer existed. She continued, if you're trying to make a point, you've made it. Now come home and stop this nonsense. I ended the message before she finished. Not out of anger, out of clarity, because I finally understood something I hadn't before. They thought this was temporary, a reaction, a phase I would outgrow. They didn't realize this wasn't about making a point. It was about changing the terms of my life. I set the phone down beside me and looked out at the horizon again. The sun had almost disappeared now, everything softer, quieter. And in that fading light, I asked myself something I had never really allowed before. What if I don't go back at all? Not after the trip. Not after things calm down. Not after they apologize if they ever do. What if this wasn't a break? What if this was a beginning? The thought didn't scare me. That was the part that surprised me most. Because for years the idea of stepping away from my family felt impossible. Now, it felt honest. I got back in the car as the last light disappeared, started the engine, and kept driving west. Not running. Not escaping. Just choosing a direction I hadn't been allowed to choose before. I reached Arizona on the fourth day. The air felt different there, dry, warm, carrying a kind of stillness that didn't press in on you the way silence used to back home. It just existed, like it didn't need anything from you. I pulled into a gas station just off the highway, the kind surrounded by nothing but open land and long stretches of road disappearing into heat. For a moment, I just sat in the car with the engine off. Then I picked up my phone. I knew I couldn't keep driving forward without telling at least one person where I was going. There was only one person I trusted with that. I called Aunt Ruth. She answered on the second ring. "Wendy?" Her voice wasn't surprised. It wasn't rushed. It was steady, like she had been expecting this call. Not the timing, maybe, but the moment itself. "I'm in Arizona," I said. There was a pause. Not the kind filled with questions. The kind that makes space. "I left," I added quietly. "I know," she said. That caught me off guard. "You know? I had a feeling," she replied gently. "You don't call me at midnight unless something inside you has already changed." I let out a small breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "They told me I wasn't part of the Hawaii trip," I said. "In front of everyone. And then I found emails. They were planning to keep me home to watch the kids. They called me free help." The words felt different now, less sharp, more distant. Like something I had already stepped away from. Ruth didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to comfort me. She just listened. And somehow, that meant more than anything anyone in my family had said in years. "I'm on my way to California," I continued. "To meet the gallery. If that's still okay." There was a soft sound on her end, like a chair shifting. "Wendy," she said, "your room is ready." My chest tightened. Not painfully, just full. "I don't know how long I'll stay," I admitted. "You don't have to," she said. "Stay as long as you need, or don't. That part is yours now." That part is yours now. I closed my eyes for a second. No conditions. No expectations. Just space. "Marcus wants to meet you tomorrow afternoon," she added. "I spoke to him this morning." "Tomorrow?" I repeated, my stomach flipping slightly. "Yes," she said, calm as ever. "You've been building this for 3 years. It's not sudden. It just feels that way because you're finally stepping into it." I smiled a little. Because she was right. Nothing about this was rushed. I had just stopped delaying it. "I'll be there tonight," I said. "I'll be waiting," she replied. We hung up. I sat there for a moment longer, phone still in my hand, letting her words settle. "That part is yours now." I stepped out of the car and filled the tank slowly, watching the sun sit high and unbothered in the sky. No one was calling me back. No one was telling me what to do next. And for the first time, that didn't feel empty. It felt like something opening. I got back in the car, started the engine, and turned west again, this time not just leaving something behind, but moving towards something that had been waiting for me all along. I crossed into California just before sunset. The sign was simple, easy to miss, if you weren't paying attention. But I saw it, and something in me shifted the second I passed it. The air changed first. Cooler, softer, carrying something faint and unfamiliar salt. I rolled down the window without thinking. And there it was, the ocean, off to my left, stretching wider than anything I had ever known. Not contained, not controlled, just open. I slowed the car down. Not because I had to, but because I didn't want to rush this moment. For 32 years, my life had been measured in what I could do for other people. How useful I was. How available. How easy it was to fit me into their plans. And now, I was driving along the edge of something that didn't need me to be anything at all. That kind of space does something to you. It doesn't fill you. It shows you how empty you've been and how much room you actually have to grow. I pulled over at a small overlook, got out of the car. The wind moved through my hair, sharp and clean, like it was clearing something out of me I hadn't realized was still there. I stood there for a long time, not thinking, not planning, just being. Then, without even questioning it, I reached back into the car and grabbed my camera. The light was fading fast, turning everything into soft blues and golds. Waves moving in slow rhythm. Endless. I lifted the camera and took the shot, not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to remember this exact version of myself, standing at the edge of something new, uncertain, but not afraid. When I got back into the car, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at it. Megan. Of course. I almost didn't open it. But something told me this one would be different. It was shorter than the others. No long explanations. No accusations. Just one line. Mom says if you're not back by the time we leave, don't bother coming back at all. I read it once. Then again. And this time, I didn't feel that familiar pull to fix things. To smooth it over. To explain myself until they understood. Because I finally saw it for what it was. Not concern. Not confusion. A condition. Come back, or lose us. I looked out at the ocean again. At something vast enough to exist without needing permission from anyone. Then I turned my phone face down. Started the car. And kept driving. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove I belonged somewhere. I was going somewhere I could belong as I already was. I reached Carmel by the sea just after dark. The town didn't feel real at first. Soft yellow lights glowing from cottage windows. Narrow streets lined with trees that bent slightly toward the ocean, like they had learned to live with the wind instead of fighting it. Everything felt quiet, but not empty, more like it was holding space for something slower. I followed the directions Aunt Ruth had texted me earlier and turned onto a smaller street just 2 blocks from the water. That's when I saw it. The ceramic cup. A small cafe with blue shutters, a hand-painted sign, and warm light spilling out onto the sidewalk. There was something about it that felt lived in. Not perfect, not polished, just real. I parked across the street and sat there for a second, hands still on the wheel. This was it. No turning around. No stepping back into the version of my life that had been decided for me. Before I could overthink it, the front door opened. And there she was. Aunt Ruth. She didn't rush toward me. Didn't ask 100 questions. She just stood there, arms open, like she had been waiting not just for me to arrive, but for me to choose this. I stepped out of the car. And the second I reached her, she wrapped me in a hug that felt steady, grounded, real, in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Welcome home, she said softly. Home. The word landed differently here. Not tied to obligation. Not tied to expectation. Just a place where I was allowed to exist. Inside, the cafe smelled like coffee and something freshly baked. A few tables were still occupied locals, maybe speaking in low voices, unbothered by my arrival. Ruth showed me upstairs. My room was simple. A bed by the window, a small desk, white walls, and beyond the glass, the ocean. I set my bag down slowly, walking toward the window like I needed to confirm it was real. You'll work mornings if you want, Ruth said behind me. 6 to noon. After that, your time is yours. Your time is yours. I turned to look at her. You're not asking me to help? I asked quietly. She smiled, not surprised by the question. I'm offering you a place, she said, not a role. That difference, I felt it immediately, and it settled somewhere deep. Later that night, after a shower and a meal I didn't have to cook, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the dark outline of the ocean. Tomorrow, I would meet Marcus Coleman. Tomorrow, the thing I had been building quietly for 3 years would finally be seen out loud. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being seen. I was afraid of ever going back to being invisible again. If you've been listening this far, maybe something in this story feels familiar in a way you can't quite explain. You don't have to say everything, but if you feel it, just type "I understand" below. I woke up before my alarm. For a second, I didn't remember where I was. Then I heard it. The ocean. Not loud, not overwhelming. Just steady, like a quiet presence that didn't need attention to exist. I sat up slowly, letting the sound settle into me. No rushing, no list waiting. Just morning. By the time I came downstairs, Aunt Ruth was already behind the counter, tying her apron. She looked up and smiled like this was normal, like I had always belonged here. Coffee? She asked. Yes, I said, and it felt like the simplest, most honest answer I'd given in a long time. She showed me how things worked without over-explaining, where the cups were, how the register worked, which regulars liked what. There was no pressure to get everything right immediately. No silent expectation that I should already know. Just space to learn. Customers came in gradually. A man in his 60s who nodded at Ruth and ordered the same drink without looking at the menu. A young woman with a sketchbook who sat by the window and stayed for 2 hours. A couple who spoke quietly, like they didn't want to disturb the calm of the room. No one asked who I was. No one assumed anything about me. I was just there. And for once, that didn't mean invisible. It meant free. Around noon, Ruth wiped her hands on a towel and glanced at me. "You ready?" she asked. My stomach tightened slightly. "Not really," I admitted. She smiled. "Good, that means it matters." I went upstairs, changed into the nicest dress I had packed. Simple, dark blue, nothing dramatic. I brushed my hair down instead of tying it back like I used to. I paused in front of the mirror. For a moment, I didn't recognize the person looking back. Not because she looked different, but because she wasn't shrinking. She wasn't preparing to stay in the background. She looked present. I grabbed my portfolio and walked out the door. Coastal Light Gallery was only a few blocks away. The closer I got, the more aware I became of my heartbeat, steady, but louder now. This wasn't like anything I had done before. There was no family role to fall back on. No script. No expectation except one: to show up as myself. When I reached the gallery, I paused at the door. White walls inside, natural light, photographs displayed with intention. It felt quiet in the same way the cafe did, but sharper somehow. Like everything in that space had been chosen carefully. I pushed the door open. A man looked up from across the room. Tall, silver hair, linen shirt. Not intimidating, just attentive. "Wendy Dixon?" he said, walking toward me. "Yes," I replied. He smiled, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Coleman. I've been looking forward to this." There was something in the way he said it that made me pause. Not polite, not rehearsed, genuine. Like he meant it. He gestured toward the gallery walls. "Come," he said. "I want to show you something." And as I followed him deeper into the space, I had the quiet, unmistakable feeling that this moment was going to change my life. Marcus didn't start with questions. He didn't ask about my background, or my training, or where I had studied, because the truth was, I hadn't studied anywhere that would impress someone like him. Instead, he walked me over to a large monitor mounted on the wall. "Your work," he said simply. My photographs filled the screen. 15 images, arranged carefully. Women waiting, women working, women existing in spaces where no one was really looking at them. I felt my chest tighten, because I had never seen them like this before. Not on my phone, not scrolling past them in a quiet, anonymous feed. Here, they looked different. Intentional, visible. Marcus stood beside me, hands loosely in his pockets. "This series," he said, "Invisible Women. That's what you called it, right?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "You see something most people don't," he continued. "Not just composition, not just light. You see presence, even when the world treats it like absence." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever described my work like that, not even me. I had just felt it. "This one," he said, pointing to a photograph. The bus stop, the woman standing alone, her posture patient, her face lined with something quiet but unbreakable. "She's waiting," Marcus said. "But she's not passive. That's the difference. You captured dignity, not just loneliness." I swallowed. "I didn't think about it that way," I admitted. "That's why it works," he replied. He turned to face me fully now. "I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition." The words landed softly, but they didn't pass through me. They stayed, echoed. "A solo exhibition?" I repeated. 15 pieces, he said. 6 weeks from now, we handle printing, framing, marketing. You focus on the work. 6 weeks. My mind tried to catch up. 3 years of quiet work. And suddenly, a deadline. A real one. "With your permission," he added, "we'd title it Invisible Women, Portraits of the Overlooked." I let the words settle. Portraits of the Overlooked. It felt right. More than right. It felt accurate. "Yes," I said quietly. "That's perfect." Marcus studied me for a moment, not critically, not skeptically, just carefully. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Okay. Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I hesitated. Because the honest answer wasn't professional. It wasn't strategic. It was simple. "I didn't think anyone would see it," I said. He nodded once. "Not surprised. That's usually the case," he said. "The artists who see the most clearly are often the last ones to believe they deserve to be seen." Something in that sentence stayed with me. Not as praise. but as recognition. The kind that doesn't inflate you. It grounds you. Marcus walked over to his desk and pulled out a folder. "Take this," he said. "Contract draft. Read it tonight. No pressure, but I'd like to move quickly if you're ready." I took it carefully. My name was printed on the front. Artist, Wendy Dixon. For a second, I just looked at it. Because for the first time in my life, my name wasn't attached to what I could do for someone else. It was attached to something I had created. And something about that felt like the beginning of a different kind of life. I didn't open the contract right away. I carried it back to the cafe like something fragile, something that might disappear if I looked at it too quickly. Aunt Ruth was closing up when I walked in, wiping down the last table near the window. She glanced at the folder in my hands and smiled. "That look," she said. "I know that look." I let out a small breath. He offered me a solo exhibition. She didn't react loudly, didn't gasp or rush toward me. She just nodded once, like this made perfect sense. "Of course he did," she said. I blinked. "Of course?" "Wendy," she said gently. "You've been ready. You just weren't standing where people could see you." That landed deeper than congratulations ever could. We closed the cafe together in quiet rhythm. Lights off, chairs tucked in, door locked. Simple things, but even those felt different here. Shared, not assigned. Upstairs, I sat at the small desk by the window. The ocean stretched out in the dark, barely visible. But I could hear it. Steady, consistent, unbothered. I opened the folder. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Terms, dates, percentages. 15 photographs. Opening in 6 weeks. 60% to me. 40 to the gallery. I read every line slowly. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to let it sink in. This wasn't a favor. This wasn't someone letting me help. This was an agreement. Between equals. My name appeared again at the bottom of the page. Wendy Dixon. Artist. I traced it lightly with my finger. For years, my name had only existed in other people's sentences. Wendy will handle it. Wendy can stay. Wendy doesn't have anything important to do. Now it was here. Attached to something I owned. Something I built. There was a quiet knock on the door. Aunt Ruth stepped in, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting one beside me. "Thank you." She didn't ask what I thought. Didn't lean over my shoulder. She just sat across from me, giving me space to decide. "I think I'm scared," I admitted after a moment. "Good," she said softly. I looked up at her. "Good? It means you understand this matters," she said. "Fear isn't always a warning. Sometimes it's a doorway." I looked back down at the contract. 6 weeks, 15 pieces. A version of my life that would be seen publicly, permanently. And suddenly, I realized something that steadied me more than anything else. I had already done the hardest part. I had created the work, in silence, without validation, without anyone telling me it mattered. Signing this was just acknowledging what had been true for a long time. I picked up the pen, paused for 1 second, not because I was unsure, but because I understood what this meant. Then I signed my name, clean, clear, undeniable. When I looked up, Aunt Ruth smiled, not proud, not surprised, just certain. And for the first time, so was I. The morning after I signed the contract, everything looked the same. The cafe opened at 6. The same regulars came in. The same soft hum of conversation filled the room. But something inside me had shifted. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else could see. Just a quiet awareness that my life now had direction. Not assigned, chosen. I tied on the cafe apron and started the coffee machine, moving through the routine Ruth had shown me the day before. My hands remembered quickly. There was comfort in that. Work that was asked for. Work that was appreciated. Work that ended when it ended. Around 9, a woman came in mid-50s, well-dressed, the kind of presence that suggested she noticed details. She ordered a cappuccino and sat near the window. At some point, she glanced at me a little longer than usual. Not rudely, just curious. "You're new," she said when I brought her drink. "I am," I replied. She nodded, then hesitated. "Are you the photographer?" she asked. I blinked. For a second, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't hear her, but because no one had ever identified me that way out loud before. "Yes," I said, quieter than I expected. "I am." She smiled. I thought so. I saw your work at Coastal Light yesterday. Marcus has excellent instincts. My chest tightened slightly. In a good way. Thank you, I said. She studied me for a moment, then added, There's honesty in what you do. That's rare. Then she returned to her coffee like the conversation had been simple. But it wasn't. Not to me. Because something had just happened that I didn't know how to process yet. A stranger had seen my work and recognized me. Without context. Without explanation. Without me having to prove anything. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Not overwhelming. Just full. Every small interaction felt sharper somehow. More present. When my shift ended, I walked back upstairs slowly, like I needed to carry that moment with me. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. My email was quiet. No messages from my family. No missed calls. For a second, that felt strange. Then I realized they had left for Hawaii. Without me. The trip that had been announced so proudly. The one I had been excluded from in front of 30 people. They were there now. And I was here. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. If anything, it felt like I had stepped out of something that had never really included me to begin with. I opened my photo files, 15 images. I studied each one carefully. Not as something I had to justify, but as something I was responsible for. This exhibition wasn't about proving my family wrong. It wasn't about showing them what they had overlooked. It was about something much quieter than that. Telling the truth. The same truth I had been capturing all along. That people can exist fully, even when no one is looking. And maybe, especially then, by the third day of my new routine, I stopped checking my phone every hour. At first, it had been instinct. Years of being available had trained me to expect interruption to respond quickly, to anticipate needs before they were even spoken. But here, nothing came. No calls, no messages, no one asking where I was or what I was doing. And slowly, that silence stopped feeling like rejection. It started to feel like space. In the afternoons, I worked. Not casually, not when I had time, but with intention. I spread my photographs across the small studio table Marcus had arranged for me to use. 15 images, each one carefully chosen, each one carrying something I hadn't fully understood when I first took it. Now I saw it more clearly. Not just loneliness, not just invisibility, but resilience, presence. A kind of quiet strength that didn't ask to be noticed but remained anyway. I adjusted tones, cropped edges, revisited details I had overlooked before. Not to make them perfect, but to make them honest. At some point, I paused and leaned back in my chair. The room was still. Sunlight filtered in through the window, and it hit me. No one had interrupted me once. No one had needed anything from me all day. And instead of feeling unnecessary, I felt focused, grounded, like I was finally using my time for something that belonged entirely to me, not borrowed, not assigned, mine. The first message came on the 4th day of their trip. I was in the studio, adjusting the contrast on one of my earlier photographs, the bus stop image Marcus had paused on when my phone buzzed against the wooden table. I didn't reach for it immediately. I finished the adjustment first, saved the file, then turned the phone over. Megan. Of course. I opened it. Where are Oliver's medication records? No greeting. No acknowledgement of anything that had happened. Just a question like I had stepped out for groceries and forgotten to come back. I stared at the message for a moment, then set the phone down again. Not to ignore it, but to notice what I felt. And, surprisingly, it wasn't urgency. It wasn't guilt. It was distance. Because for the first time, I could see the pattern clearly. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. The phone buzzed again. Another message. He won't sleep. What do you usually do? I exhaled slowly. There had been a time not long ago when I would have answered immediately. Detailed instructions, step by step, trying to solve everything from miles away, like I was still responsible. But that version of me had been built on something fragile. The belief that I had to earn my place by being useful. I picked up the phone again, typed a response, paused, then deleted it, not out of anger, out of clarity, because this wasn't my responsibility anymore, not in the way it had been. I set the phone face down and turned back to my screen. The photograph was still there, the woman at the bus stop, waiting, but not asking anyone to come for her. And something about that felt familiar in a different way now. Not like recognition, like understanding. The messages didn't stop. They just changed. Less demanding, more unsettled. That evening, as I was closing my laptop, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father. I hesitated before opening it. He didn't text often. When he did, it usually meant something had shifted. "Wendy, call me when you can." No pressure. No accusation. Just that. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I stepped outside. The air was cooler now. The ocean quieter, like it had settled into night. I pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. "Wendy." His voice sounded different. Not distant. Not distracted. Present. "Hi, Dad." There was a pause. "I saw something," he said. "Megan showed me your work, online." I didn't respond right away. "I didn't know," he continued, "about any of it." "I didn't tell you," I said calmly. Another pause. "Yes," he admitted, "but I didn't ask either." That landed somewhere deeper than an apology would have. We stood in that silence together for a moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Hawaii hasn't been what your mother thought it would be." I almost smiled. Not out of satisfaction, just recognition. "She's stressed," he added. "The kids are a lot. Megan's overwhelmed. Things are disorganized." I leaned lightly against the railing. "I'm sure they'll figure it out," I said. He let out a quiet breath. "You always kept things running smoothly," he said. There it was. Not quite acknowledgement, but closer than anything I had heard from him before. "I did," I replied. Another pause. Then, softer this time. "I saw your name," he said, "on the gallery site." I closed my eyes for a second. "And? I'm proud of you." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional, but it was real. And for a moment, I just stood there, letting those words exist without questioning them. "Thank you," I said. We didn't say much after that. No big resolution. No promises. Just a quiet shift in something that had always felt fixed. When I hung up, the night felt a little different. Not lighter, but clearer. Because for the first time, someone in my family had seen me. Not for what I could do, but for who I had become. A week later, I stood inside Coastal Light Gallery. My photographs hung on white walls, quiet but undeniable. People moved slowly, stopping, looking, really looking. Not past the work. Into it. Marcus stood near the entrance. Aunt Ruth beside me. No one asked me to step back. No one placed me behind the scene. I was already where I belonged. Not because they finally made space for me, but because I chose it. And maybe that's the part that matters most. If this felt familiar, you're not alone. Subscribe. Power moves quietly.